After the release of Super Mario Kart back in the 90s, there was a plethora of kart racing games, and while the genre has slowly started to decline, there is a brand new one on the PlayStation 4, Coffin Dodgers, and it has an interesting concept where you're playing as retirees trying to run away from death. But is this game some of your best golden years, or should it just be buried 6 feet under? Originally released last year on Steam, Coffin Dodgers has made its way to the PlayStation 4. It's a pretty simplistic kart racing game where you control one of 7 different retirees and even an unlockable character in Death himself, and your goal is to race through various different courses, blasting your enemies with a few different power-ups in order to win the race, and by doing so, avoid being killed. While there are several different play modes, including up to 4-player split-screen multiplayer, the main focus of the game is the single-player story mode. In it, there are 4 sets of 3 tracks, including a finale final track, making a total of 13 different races for you to go through. The story mode focuses around the Sunny Pines retirement community, where you're playing as one of the 7 retirees who's facing off against death. Each of the races features 8 racers, and at the end of a set of 3, whoever is at the bottom of the standings ends up being killed by the Grim Reaper himself. However, they aren't eliminated from the game. They come back as zombies and continue to be a thorn in your side throughout the rest of the races. While there is some variety to the 8 playable characters, there isn't as much variety when it comes to the vehicles in the game. Each of the racers starts off on a standard scooter, kind of like a hover-round, and you can upgrade it through the upgrade shop. You'll earn money at the end of each race, depending upon what place you end up finishing, and then you can buy upgrades, such as a better engine, more acceleration, better handling, and then some various things like the type of weapon you have, or the amount of weapons you can hold, as well as color schemes. After upgrading your vehicle, it will stay upgraded even after completing the story mode. If you decide to replay the story mode after completing it the first time, all of your upgrades stay intact, so it kind of works as a new game plus. When it came down to race time, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how well the game ended up controlling. I was actually expecting far worse for a game like this just from its overall presentation. But the core racing mechanics actually did work quite well. There was a few occasions where some turning and collision detection overall was a little bit shady, but overall the racing actually worked and was pretty fun. While the racing's all fine and good, for any great kart racer you also need weapons. And there is a okay variety of weapons here with Coffin Dodgers. You'll have oil cans you can throw behind you to make your enemies slip on the racetrack. You'll have shock paddles that can cause a shockwave to stun enemies that are coming up from behind you or just all around you. You'll also have shields to block enemy fire. You'll have missiles that can home in and really devastate your opponents, or you can be devastated just as well. I had many times where I was in first place, get hit by a missile, and I end up dropping back to 6th or even last place in a particular race. And sometimes it can be very difficult to end up catching up from something like that. And then there's the Uzi, which ends up doing what you would think it was. It's a machine gun-like fire, and you can actually control it by actually firing all at once by holding down the button, or you can actually space it out, being able to hit multiple opponents, or actually various other hazards that are around the race course. The problem is the hit detection with the Uzi itself, even when it's targeted on an enemy, was very, very hit or miss. There was plenty of times where an enemy was right in front of me, and I was missing them with every single bullet, including wasting an entire clip of the Uzi without doing any damage. When it comes to track variety, there honestly isn't a whole lot here. There are 4 sets of different tracks, and they take place in different areas instead of each of the 3 tracks taking place in a different spot. So you'll start off in the retirement village itself, just a kind of normal neighborhood-like setting. You'll eventually go into farmland that does have some unique stuff, like a UFO flying overhead, abducting sheep, and being able to knock you out of the race using a tractor beam. And then you'll also have a graveyard that features most of the same setting from earlier in the game, but now there's a few added areas like the graveyard itself and an underground crypt where it had you going around in a spiral. But overall, I felt that the tracks themselves were a little bit lacking, and a few tracks in particular were exceptionally short. The races were over really before I felt like I even had gotten a chance to get going in it. When it comes to the difficulty in the game, the tracks themselves take a little bit to get used to, but after 1 or 2 laps around, you'll probably have things memorized and be able to easily handle it. Even the toughest courses are pretty easy to manage. When it comes to the opponents, though, that you're going to be battling with, if you stay in a bunch, you're going to have a lot of problems. One of the things that the game has that I think makes it a little bit unique is that every character has a melee weapon that they can use at any time. So not only do you have the weapons you find on the course, every character has a cane or various other things that you can actually get in order to bash your opponents by pressing the circle button. You can even hold it in, which will slow you down a bit, but you can knock an enemy with a fully charged up melee hit and knock them off of their cart instantly. Your normal hits, though, are just going to cause little bits of stun, and you'll be able to maybe move around them after stunning them. Thankfully, the game does not feature rubber band mechanics. If you're unfamiliar with it, basically means no matter how far you end up getting ahead or how fast you're going, the AI is always behind you. But in Coffin Dodgers, you can get far ahead of your opponent. In fact, once I upgraded my cart, I was able to easily lap my opponents. While there was a few tracks here and there where I ended up falling behind and not finishing in first place on my first attempt, once I was able to upgrade my cart, the game was an absolute breeze. Outside of the single player mode, there is free race, time trial, and another mode that kind of works like a checkpoint race. You're in the open world environment of the game, which you actually can do free play as well and just kind of roam around if you wanted to. But in the mode, you're given an item and an arrow comes up and you have to get to that item as the time is slowly ticking down. If you get to the item before the time runs out, you get a little bit of additional time. And your goal is just to see how much of a high score you can get. There are no opponents and no extra challenges that are added to the mode, so it's kind of just a little extra bonus that doesn't really add overall too much to the game. Multiplayer wise though, there is the free roam mode where you and up to 4 friends can just roam around if you want to in the open world environment, as well as you have the typical races that you can do 1 to 4 player split screen multiplayer, but the game does not feature online play. In the 4-player split screen, you can actually decide how tough your opponents end up being, what type of cart you as well as your fellow racers end up using. So you can use the best, the medium, or the worst cart if you wanted to. And then of course you can select from all the races once you have completed them all in the story mode. For completing the story mode your first time through, you will unlock the 8th playable character, Death himself, and you actually get an alternate ending if you're able to complete the story mode as Death, which should be no problem as you can keep all your upgrades from the first time you ran through the single player mode. And the alternate ending actually I think is far superior than the original ending to the game. Graphically, the game is just barely passable. There's a lot of ugly models, especially when it came to the hands of the main characters. There was a few different set pieces that looked nice, like the sheep and the UFO and the graveyard, as well as the zombies that pop out of the ground and try to jump on you to stop you from continuing the race and sending you off the track. But overall, though, they're just okay, if not bad. In the music department, it's all upbeat and chipper style music. It sounds like it would be out of a bad Tim Schafer game. And the music really started to grind on my nerves after only a handful of races. It really feels like they got one piece of music and just changed it up a tiny bit for each of the tracks in the game. In the end though, Coffin Dodgers is just an okay budget kart racer. The racing mechanics themselves work pretty well, and I actually had some fun. But the courses themselves were lacking, there was a lack of weapons, and just overall fun to the game, as well as only a couple of modes to keep you playing. I completed the story mode on my first playthrough in less than an hour, and I was able to get the Platinum Trophy in about 2 hours. So if you're a trophy hunter, just like those easy Platinums, Coffin Dodgers may be up your alley. In the end though, the game is $12.99, available on PlayStation 4 and Steam, which I think is just a little bit too much for what you end up getting here. But I'm going to be giving Coffin Dodgers a 4 out of 10. It's okay, basic fun, maybe some fun multiplayer, but overall, there are much better racing games. If you have the Wii U, just get Mario Kart. In the end though, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.